Welcome back. What's up, guys? How's it going? Um, it's good to be here. It's really good to be here. I'm actually really excited for this chapter. This is a chapter. It's called Three Kinds of Assets. That I've really thought a lot about in a lot of my right brain activities, sort of like my eulogy experiments that I do. So I'm really excited to go over this, guys. This is going to be gold. So going off of last episode, we talked a little bit about this idea of the PPC balance and how 7 habits are essentially it's of highly effective people. And effectiveness is defined as the balance between production and production capability. So it's the PPC balance. Now, production is obviously like the desired results, whereas the production capability is the ability of the asset to produce the golden eggs. So this section is on 3 kinds of assets. So it's on the production capability part of it. So Stephen Covey talks about these 3 different assets. There's physical assets, financial assets, and then human assets. So going over them, a physical asset is something that will make your life easier, right? For example, Stephen Covey uses the example of a lawnmower that he just used it straight for two years, and then it broke down, and he didn't maintain it at all, didn't service it or do anything to make sure it was going to run smoothly, and he ended up having to replace it only after 2 summers. And lawnmower should last way longer than that. And so he says it's not effective to not work on the PC. He says I focused way too much on the P, which was the mowed lawn, and not enough time taking care of the physical asset that gave him that P. Other examples are like a car. I know we talked about that a little bit in the previous podcast. Like a laptop, right? Making sure that your battery is sufficient and good to go. Your camera works, your speakers work, or even your phone, right? Cracked screen, all of that stuff. Like a washer or a dryer. One of my favorites is our bodies. Our body's a physical asset that allows us to move, right? If we don't take care of it, if we don't eat healthy, if we don't rest, if we don't manage our emotions and our stresses, if we don't exercise in strength, endurance, and flexibility, then we're gonna go downhill, right? So taking care of ourselves is a great this thing of a physical asset, where if you just go for pure production, just work, you're just gonna burn out. And so there's that PPC balance that we gotta take care of. Okay, and then the financial assets. This is one that I probably understand the least, but essentially he's talking about principal and interest. And so when we dig into principal and deduct that, we lower our ability to produce more. So let's say we go on a splurge to increase our standard of living, buy a bunch of new things, right? Well, sure, we bought a ton of stuff, but we are not investing any money to produce further income. And if we don't do that, then eventually our capabilities to sustain ourselves are going to dwindle until they're absolutely nothing, and they can't even meet basic needs, right? And so that's what he's saying there is with this financial thing, we need to be careful to, yes, it's okay to spend money on increasing our standard of living, on the golden eggs, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we are investing and putting our resources towards these financial assets that will help us to generate more income in the future, right? He says that our most important financial asset is our own capacity to earn. I kind of have interpreted that as more like books. I love reading books. One of my dreams in my dream house is to have a library full of books. All of them I've read. And as you open each one, you see my notes and my annotations in the sides of the margins. You see words underlined and quotes that are in there, papers slipped in from other things. Just a library full of just my studies. And just to yeah, like build credibility in like what I'm talking about and to find my voice in the world. But it's also a very strong like emotional and like motivating thing for me to like have that, because it like symbolizes all this work, all of this like that I'm increasing my financial abilities, my knowledge of how the world works, how the stock market works, how the economy works, and how like just humans work, right? And by understanding those things, I'm increasing my capacity to earn. So there's that for us. Also, it's really cool how he says that when we don't continually invest in improving our own PC, we severely limit our options. We're locked into our present situation, running scared of our corporation or a boss's opinion of us, economically dependent and defensive. So like if we don't actually have like the courage or like the ability to produce for ourselves, we're going to be very dependent upon our boss's opinion of us, because if he doesn't like us and he fires us, we're dead. We're not going to have that life support. And so continually investing into oneself in their own capacity to earn is crucial in order to not live in this defensive, victimized, dependent state. And he says it's just like not effective. So that's the financial side of it. Now, here's where it gets really good, guys. So if you haven't been listening, listen now, because the human area is phenomenal. So just to kind of give you guys a quick story from my own life, I went to that. It ties into this human asset, I promise. I went into Iceland with a couple of buddies back in October of 2021, and phenomenal experience, super awesome. I loved it. The only problem was that I lost my passport there, and so I missed my flight home. But everyone else flew home, and so I was stranded in Iceland all by myself. Just like waiting on the embassy to get a new passport so I could go home. And it was an interesting experience there. I was only planning on being there for 5 days. I ended up being there for 12. So a wild experience. But I learned something very crucial and important there. That trip was one of the best trips I've ever taken in my life. A ton of fun with just some of the bros, just cruising through Iceland, right? Like amazing countryside. It's so beautiful. 10 out of 10, I'd recommend that. Go to Iceland. Just to lose your passport. But as soon as they all left, the whole experience just tanked for me. Even though I was surrounded in like one of the most beautiful countries in the world, which is absolutely true, it just didn't feel joyful or meaningful or impactful or as much fun as it was doing these hikes and seeing these amazing waterfalls by myself. And then that trip taught me that like relationships is where true joy and meaning comes from. That relationships is where the meaning of life is, that's where we exist, that's where the main purpose of life is, right? And so when he talks about human relationships, he talks about this idea of production, the golden eggs, the desired results, that joy, that meaning, and the production capability or the quality of that relationship. And this applies into any areas of our life, whether it be with our spouses, our kids, especially those areas, but also like coworkers or just friends or strangers on the street. Like, doesn't matter, right? He says here, when two people in a marriage are more concerned about getting the golden eggs, the benefits, than they are in preserving the relationship that makes them possible, they often become insensitive and inconsiderate, neglecting the little kindnesses and courtesies so important to a deep relationship. So like, when all we want is just our way and our needs and how we want things the way that we want them right now, what ends up happening is people become insensitive. They stop doing the little kindnesses and little courtesies, just those like little small acts that build relationships. The small, I don't know, I'm not married, but like whatever married couples do to foster that love, right? But even just like with friendships, like saying hi, sending a text, calling someone, just saying hi to someone in your classes or at work, just asking them about something that they like, and then becoming their student, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But just like stuff to build that relationship, to show that you care about them, right? And as you increase that production capability, well, it's going to do what it does best. And it's going to create those golden eggs. It's going to produce that joy and like a meaningful friendship that you actually, like, it's very satisfying and like deeply fulfilling and full of rich experiences. And so he says here, so when people are have the golden egg paradigm, right? So they're just focusing on production, not on the relationship. He says they begin to use control levers to manipulate each other, to focus on their own needs, to justify their own position, and look for evidence to show the wrongness of the other person. The love, the richness, the softness, and spontaneity begin to deteriorate. The goose gets sicker day by day. I kind of view that as like falling out of love, right? Like this goose gets sicker and sicker. Your love is waning and waning, but your love is waning because you're not loving them. A good buddy of mine, Hayden Schapp, taught me that. Well, I've heard this other places, but he like really reinforced it. Was this idea of like, love is a verb, right? But it's a proactive kind of love. A reactive kind of love is the feeling. A proactive love is the verb. And so you can actually tell where a society and a civilization are by their definition of what love is. If it's a proactive love, then they're doing very, very well for themselves. If it's not a proactive love, if it's a feeling, a reactive love, then that civilization or organization or group probably isn't doing so hot. So kind of cool there. Another important relationship is that with children. I'm really excited for this. This whole book can relate to raising kids, and it's amazing how well it shifts your paradigm about like how to do it. It's crazy. I've never done it, so I'm like, I don't want to get into like specific suggestions or anything like that, because I'm definitely not a parent. I don't really know how to do that, and I recognize that. But in theory, these things hold true, and I'm really excited to apply them to my kids when I have kids. What's really cool about children is these ideas become harder and harder because children are very dependent on us as parents. They're smaller, they're not as smart, they don't work as hard, they don't know better, right? And so when you're a parent, it's so easy to just go for the golden egg. It's so easy to just force them to clean their room or to do their chores and to yell at them or intimidate them just to get that golden egg, right? It's so easy to neglect that PC work, to neglect the relationship work, the training, he says the training, the communicating, the relating, the listening. He says it's so easy to take advantage, to manipulate, to get what you want the way you want it right now, right? And so it's like this idea of like you can be very like authoritarian type style and be like, no, like I'm getting things my way right now, the way I want it done. And that's a golden egg paradigm. It's focusing only on production, not on the production capability, which is a relationship. And then another extreme of the golden egg paradigm he talks about is this idea of relaxation, right? Or like permissive style, to where you just give them their way all the time. You buy them whatever they want. They can spend their time however they want. They can there's like no standards, there's no like no goals, there's no direction. It's just like you do what you want, whatever. We're not gonna like punish you or anything like that. It's just you do you, you know. But there has to be this like balance between there. So I like really want to just like there's no personal commitment or like discipline or responsibility in a permissive style. And so both authoritarian and permissive are both golden egg paradigms, just on extremes of that. And so he says that there's got to be this like balance, where he talks about production capability, about developing that relationship. And as you develop the relationship, that those golden eggs will eventually come. So he says, you want to have your way or you want to be liked. So those are those two things. I'm just going to read what he says here because he phrases it really just important and like really, really well. So pay attention to this. He says, but what happens meantime to the goose? So if you have authoritarian or a permissive style, he's saying, what happens in the meantime to the goose? What sense of responsibility, of self-discipline, of confidence in the ability to make good choices or achieve important goals is a child going to have a few years down the road? And what about your relationship? When he reaches those critical teenage years, the identity crisis, will he know from his experience with you that you will listen without judging, that you really deeply care about him as a person, that you can be trusted no matter what? Will the relationship be strong enough for you to reach him, to communicate with him, to influence him? So I love the way he phrases that. It's like you can be either authoritarian or permissive, but what happens to the child? Is he going to be able to take responsibility for his life? Is he going to be able to set standards for himself, to set goals for himself and actually achieve those goals, to have that confidence in himself, right? Are those things going to happen? And even like independent of that, like when identity crises happen, when problems happen, because they always do, especially in teenage years and in college years when you make big choices, you're trying to figure out who you are and trying to figure out your place in the world and friends and peer pressure and social pressure, right? Is the relationship strong enough to where your child would trust you? That he knows that you'll truly listen to him and not judge him? To not give advice from your own frame of reference, but that you'll seek to truly understand where he's coming from and to communicate that understanding? Is he gonna come to you with all of this advice, or is he gonna go somewhere else? Because his whole childhood he grew up with this parent that never really showed that they could listen to their child. Never showed that they would put in the extra work to build that PC, to build that relationship, to foster it. Just things to think about. And I think about this a lot as I create my first creation for my family and things I want to do with my kids. It's like, Stephen Covey talks, this next session talks about an experience that he has with his child, where so one thing that Stephen Covey does that I love is he does a father-child date with all of his kids. And so it's like a regular occurrence. So they do this very frequently, and it does it with all of his kids. And so it's just like time that he sets aside to have one-on-one time with each of his kids. I imagine that's probably weekly or I wouldn't know how often he does it, but he says that it's just frequently. I guess it depends on how many kids you have, how much time. But this is like a very high leverage activity to do, to be able to get both to increase the goose's production and the golden eggs. And so he talks about this like idea of how he goes with his daughter and he says, hey, like it's our night. So like you pick what we want to do tonight, like whatever you want to do, like we're going to do. And she says, oh, Dad, like that's okay. I'm good. Like you don't need to do it. And he says, no, like really, like well, let's do whatever you want to do. And she looks at him and she says, Dad, it's really okay because what I want to do, I know that you don't want to do. And he asks her, well, like, what is it? And she says, I want to go see Star Wars, but I know that you hate Star Wars because you always fall asleep. And he says, like, no, like, honey, if that's what you like to do, then, like, let's do it. So he's trying to build that relationship, to focus on this production capability, this human asset, this relationship, right? And she says, like, Dad, like, don't worry about it. It's okay. But she says, but you know why you don't like Star Wars? It's because you don't understand the philosophy of the Jedi Knight. Kind of an interesting thing. She says, the things that you teach, Dad, it's the exact same thing that Jedi Knights go through. And he was like, really? Like, teach me. And so then he becomes her student. She teaches him the ways of a Jedi Knight and explains why all the things that he teaches are the ways of a Jedi Knight and why it's so important and why it's like meaningful and really cool and why it excites her. And then he all of a sudden like not only does he like Star Wars now, but he also enjoyed this like golden egg of nurturing, of just like meaningful joy of spending this rich, deep experience with his daughter. Just Star Wars, like something random, but it was important to her, and so it was important to him. You know, so it's just like amazing how that works. Like nurturing the relationship is what we can do to not only find joy in this life, because that's what relationships do, but it also allows us to get those golden eggs. Like he says an example in here about, I suppose you want your daughter to clean her room, right? Well, like the most ideal scenario in that is that she willingly does it and commits to it and keeps that commitment, like week after week after week. And he says that your daughter is the goose and like the asset that produces the golden egg. So like she produces that clean room, but she also produces with your relationship, again, that meaning and happiness and light in your life. He says here, but so he says, he just words it very well. And he says, if you have P and PC in balance, she cleans the room cheerfully without being reminded, because she is committed and has the discipline to stay with the commitment. She's a valuable asset, a goose that can produce golden eggs. But if your paradigm is focused on production, on getting the room clean, you might find yourself nagging her to do it. You might even escalate your efforts to threatening or yelling, and in your desire to get the golden egg, you undermine the health and welfare of the goose. That's like super cool for me to be able to like understand that. Personally, like I really like the way that my parents raised me. It was very open and free, and I felt like they truly did love me. But they also gave me chores to do, and expected that I do those chores, and expected that I did my homework, and expected that I had this responsibility in my life, that I took control, that I acted and chose to do things in my own free will. And like really, really, really cool. And I'm like very, very grateful for the way that they raised me up, and teaching me how to how to work, how to be a hard worker, how to take responsibility, how to be kind to people, how to be nice. And so had they been super strict or super like authoritative or permissive, like who knows what would have happened. But I'm just grateful that they focused on not only the P but also on the PC. So that was like really, really cool to see. And so the balance just lies in that P-PC balance, in developing the relationship, but also making sure the house is clean, right? And again, I'm not a parent, so I don't clearly understand how this works or why it works, but Stephen Covey is an amazing person, and if he says that it works, I believe that it works, and I have faith in it, and that I believe the theory holds, and that it can be done. Will it require lots of work and planning and thinking and probably praying and faith? Yeah, it will. But is it possible? I believe so. And I'm excited to figure it out when I become a parent. But with that being said, that actually reminds me, like, I actually don't need to wait till I'm a parent. Like, this same stuff happens with, like, my roommates or with my coworkers or with friends or even with, like, dating girls. Like, either way, it's, like, it's the same principles. And so I guess I actually don't need to wait to become a parent. But guys, yeah, so those are the three kind of assets. So there's physical, financial, and human. And how when we take time to focus on the asset itself, that will produce the golden eggs. And so that is like adding on to our definition of effectiveness. So guys, that's it for today. Thanks for hopping on. And if you have any questions, let me know. Appreciate it.